Let's talk to Inaya Folarin Iman, who's a writer, campaigner, and actually stood as a Brexit Party parliamentary candidate last year. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
What do you make of the protests that have taken place in this country? We talked about this an awful lot on the show yesterday. I have to say I was furious with some of the footage we did see, and I'm horrified that people are allowed to just break the pandemic social distancing rules with impunity, it would appear, and the rest of us are obeying them. But what do you think the purpose of a Black Lives Matters protest in the UK is, while when over a crime that's happened in the United States?
I mean, personally, I am fundamentally kind of fed up with this overly negative characterisation of Britain to try and frame Britain as a country that has not progressed profoundly over the last kind of 30, 40 years when it comes to race relations. There was an attempt to import the kind of complexities of the American race relations situation in Britain and create this overarching narrative of a universal Black experience. And that Black experience, according to them, is essentialized as one of oppression, victimization, and racism. But when you actually look at the empirical evidence and also speak to many Black people, it does not stack up to the reality of what these, generally speaking, radical left activists are saying. So, for example, in the UK, many of them have been talking about the deaths in police custody and trying to say that that is an example of kind of systemic racism in the UK. According to the Independent Office of Police Conduct, over the past 10 years, 163 people died in police custody, and only 13 were Black. Now, obviously, nobody wants anyone to die in police custody, but that is hardly an example of an epidemic of systemic racism. And according to many surveys that have been done on Black Caribbeans and Black Africans, they have really high levels of trust in the local police and faith in British democracy. So what this is really a mythology to try and kind of, cause tension and cause chaos in a society that has actually progressed significantly over the last.
Well, this is it. We had the former England footballer and anti-race campaigner John Barnes on the show yesterday. He spoke quite extensively, and he was saying, look, he's basically making the point, and he needs to have a point. Look, you as a white woman don't actually know what the lived experience is, effectively, of Black people, and I completely accept that. I'm not under any illusions that I do. Other than the fact that the evidence seems to suggest that this is not a particularly racist society. There's still, of course, there'll be racists. There are racists in every society, and by the way, in every ethnic group as well. But things have, I suggest, but things have massively improved since, say, the 1970s, and I would say things are getting better. And he said things had not got better, but as you mentioned, which I was quite surprised by, and you say that's not the case in your experience, but it is interesting, isn't it, the conflation of what's going on in America, quite apart from the fact that people holding up their hands and saying, don't shoot, to police officers who are not routinely armed in this country. I think armed police in this country are called out on average to 26,000 is incidents a year, and in a typical year there are only a handful, under 5, sometimes none, sometimes 1 or 2 people who are shot dead by police. That is the level of police, trigger happy police we have in this country. It shows how few people are being killed of any colour in that case, but also the fact that we have a very different history of race in this country. We didn't have to have a civil rights movement because we didn't have Black people who were brought to this country as slaves and who had no civil rights. Why do you think people want to conflate the no doubt at all very difficult situation in terms of race relations in America with what's going on in the UK?
Well, I just want to pick up on your point. It's really important what you said, that the contexts are fundamentally different. In America, they had institutionalized slavery, Jim Crow law, segregation, and a civil rights movement, as you mentioned. And many of the Black people that came in America didn't come to America voluntarily. The situation in Britain, most of the people here that happen to be Black or Afro-Caribbean heritage came to Britain voluntarily in the post-war years. And so the reason that I think many of them are doing that is because a lot of people have the social media and the internet, and they want to create this kind of overarching narrative to feel part of something greater. We've seen this with many of the kind of social justice movements, which are bulldozing over the complexities of a range of issues in order to perpetuate this victim narrative. And I think it's deeply unfortunate. As a young woman, I don't want to grow up in a society that is actually going backwards and constantly telling me that I'm oppressed, I'm a victim. That's not how I feel. I'm a free sovereign agent, and I'm very proud to be British. And I think that's the message that we need to be teaching to a young generation growing up.
Inaya Folarin Iman, I'm sure an awful lot of people are cheering at the radio right now. Thank you very much indeed.